Apple has just released iOS 16.1.2 to the general public just 3 weeks after the release of iOS 16.1.1. And this was the only release we did not see a macOS, watchOS, iPadOS update alongside it. This was an iPhone specific update. And as always in this video, we're going to talk about what's new in the update, what you should know, and also if you should update or not. So starting off with the size of this update, you could see mine came in at 335 megabytes, coming from 16.1.1 on my iPhone 14 Plus. Now that size will vary depending on your device and the version you are coming from, but it should be around 300 to 400 megabytes. Now if we head over and check out the build number, so if we go to our settings, general about 16.1.2, we can see that the new build number here is 20B110. All right, so now what's new here in iOS 16.1.2? And as I always say about these double point updates, never expect anything major with a double point update. So a 0.1, 0.2, that's 2 points in there. That means that's mostly going to be bug fixes. The single point updates are the ones with all the features. So right away, you know with this update not to expect anything major. So the first thing I want to talk about is what Apple is calling crash detection optimizations on iPhone 14 and 14 Pro models. So it seems like Apple has finally figured out how to avoid crash detection from false triggering while riding roller coasters. So since this feature detects a crash using G-force sensors and other data, Apple admitted that roller coasters fooled the system and would call emergency services just from riding a roller coaster. We saw this in headlines multiple times. It actually happened at multiple different theme parks. So this update, I would imagine, is going to adjust the algorithm that is used to determine whether or not a user was involved in a car crash. So I'm not sure on the specifics of this. Of course, I don't work for Apple, but it could just be simply using geofencing, maybe around major theme parks. I'm not exactly sure, but we should see an adjustment to the algorithm used for crash detection so that your iPhone no longer thinks that you've been in a crash when you're really just on a roller coaster. Now, the other bullet point that Apple includes in the release notes says improved compatibility with wireless carriers. And that is a very vague statement. It doesn't really tell us exactly what has been improved, what type of compatibility we're talking about, or what wireless carriers we're talking about. So this is very vague, but I did notice that the modem firmware version has remained the same. So I have a hard time believing that, wireless connectivity is going to improve with this update. It has something more to do with compatibility with select wireless carriers. So once we get some details on the specifics of this improved compatibility, I will let you guys know in my next Apple Weekly episode. Now, one thing I've gotten a few questions about is, do we have a limit for AirDrop now for everyone? So you can see my AirDrop is currently set to everyone. And the reason I mention this is because iPhone users in China have already seen this change from everyone to everyone for 10 minutes. So that was a new little hidden feature in iOS 16.1.1 for users in China. And the reason for this is basically government based, and it was implemented to prevent the spread of misinformation. Now, the reason I'm talking about this here in the US is because Bloomberg did report that this feature is also coming to the US and all other countries soon. But I did try it out here, of course, in 16.1.2, and it still just says everyone right there. But just know in the future that will no longer be there. It will be everyone for 10 minutes. It will never remain on for everyone indefinitely. And then the final thing that Apple mentions in the release notes is that this update provides important security updates. However, Apple does not specify what the security updates are just yet. So it does usually take a day or two before Apple actually publishes the CVEs and all of the bugs that were addressed with the latest updates. So 16.1.2 will have additional fixes on top of the improved compatibility with wireless carriers and the crash detection optimizations. So just know your device will also be more secure after updating. And of course, like I always do, I will talk about the specifics of those security updates in my next Apple Weekly episode coming this Saturday. Now, as far as performance goes, don't expect any major changes here. Again, this is a double point update. There are never any significant performance improvements or battery life improvements on a double point update. So I do still have the lag here in the control center for my HomeKit device. As you can see, we just have kind of like this little stutter and this little lag with all of my HomePods right there, which is a little bit weird. It doesn't happen for my AC unit right there, but it does happen for my HomePods for whatever reason. Now, if we head over to Geekbench, I do want to run a quick GPU benchmark test on Geekbench just to compare it to 16.1.1, just to see how we score compared to the previous version. I do this in every video, even though we're not expecting any major changes. It is always fun to kind of keep track of the performance of these updates. All right, so we scored a 1742 on the single core and a 4647 on the multi-core. And if we compare that to 16.1.1, which you can see right there, we got the exact same single core score, and we did get a slightly higher multi-core score. So 4584 versus 4647 on the multi-core. So based on this test, you should actually see a minor improvement in multi-core performance, but like I said, you're not really going to notice anything like actual day-to-day usage. You're not going to see any improvements to performance unless you just had major issues on 16.1.1. And then like I just mentioned about battery life, again, don't expect a fix for battery drain or any type of improvement to battery life with this update. It's highly unlikely that Apple touched anything related to battery life or anything that would even affect battery life. All right, so now let's answer the question, should you update to iOS 16.1.2? And if you have an iPhone 14 or 14 Pro, this is a must update. I don't think that you want crash detection to accidentally trigger and get emergency services called to your location, do you? So yeah, I would recommend updating on the iPhone 14 or 14 Pro immediately, just so you don't have this issue when riding a roller coaster or, when you flip over on a golf cart, whatever you're out there doing, you don't want emergency services to accidentally get called. Now, if you're on any other device and you're on 16.1 or 16.1.1, then you might as well go ahead and update. I mean, this 16.1.2 update is going to bring more security to your device, and you might even notice some minor bug fixes. However, if you're on the iOS 16.2 beta, there is no reason to downgrade for this update. The final version of 16.2 will be out in a couple of weeks, and it's going to include these fixes along with many other fixes and features. So if you're on 16.2 beta, no, don't downgrade to get on 16.1.2. And then finally, let's talk about what to expect next from Apple. So we only have one more public iOS release for the rest of 2022, and that is iOS 16.2, and that should be coming in mid-December. So within the next, I would say 3 weeks, we will have iOS 16.2, and this is going to bring a ton of new features and changes, bug fixes, you name it. We're going to have a ton of changes in that update, and that's going to hold us over until 2023 when we'll see the next update, which is probably going to be 16.2.1 or 16.3. We'll talk about that when the time comes, but just know that the next major release is going to be, the next public release, I should say, is going to be in mid-December, 16.2. Keep it locked to the channel. I've been talking about 16.2 ever since it started the beta process, and I will continue to talk about it here on the channel. So there you have it. That is iOS 16.1.2, a pretty minor bug fix update that really just addresses the major flaw with the iPhone 14 series and that crash detection being triggered by roller coasters. But nonetheless, I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, I would appreciate if you gave it a thumbs up. Also, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss my iOS 16.2 video and a lot more iOS videos into 2023. But anyways, guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.